Hello and welcome back. This is New Australia Radio on Eastside FM, and we're just listening to a very beautiful tune, Rivers of Gold, by the group called Chutney. And we're very lucky because we have one of the members, possibly the band leader. Is that right?
Pretty much.
Very good. And so just introduce yourself, band member.
Good morning, listeners of New Music Australia and Elsen. My name is Ben Adler, and I'm the violinist and allegedly the band leader of Chutney.
Fantastic. So tell me, because you've just put out an album with Chutney, Ajar. Tell me a little bit about the album and sort of what's been happening with it.
Yeah, so Ajar, or Ajar of Chutney, and if you look at the album artwork on Spotify, you'll understand why Ajar has many different layers of meaning, and we're quite pleased with that. Ajar is the compilation, the tasting jar, as a newspaper recently called it, of basically the best that we've done for the 4.5 years we've been playing together. We have, as you will recognize if you listen, a very, very wide range of genres, kind of umbrellafied by the vague term that we kind of have coined ourselves called klezmerfusion, klezmer being Jewish Eastern European folk music, and fusion being licensed to do whatever the hell else we want to do. So to answer the question, it's 13 tracks, 65 minutes of music, which take you on quite a highly curated journey from the shtetl, which is the Eastern European Jewish village of the late 19th century, through to New York, I suppose, of the 40s and 50s, through to some pretty crazy electronic spaces, to Britney Spears, back to the Russian concert hall of Rimsky-Korsakov. We take you on a big journey around the world and through time, and we really hope that people will enjoy the ride.
Wonderful. I've been following what the band's been doing on social media. It looks like it's been quite a large effort on the recording front for the album. It's
been huge. I suppose the first time you do anything is always bigger than maybe the successive times. Look, we started thinking about an album within a year of starting the band, so that was 21. We started applying for grants in 21. We were rejected 4 times over 3 years. Our first manager, Nikki, recognized that we needed to look elsewhere to be able to fund the album, so we turned to our community of fans and the Jewish community. We put on a big fundraising concert for Hanukkah, which is a big festival, at the end of 2022, and we raised a sizable amount of money. It ended up being maybe about a third of our total costs, but at the time it was certainly enough to seed capital, if you will, to give us confidence to kick off the process. And we recorded from April 2023 to January this year, on and off, with the wonderful Daniel Natalie at A-Sharp Studio in Riverwood. And it became this incredible creative odyssey, I think, always discovering, rediscovering, rethinking, reimagining, creating, playing, experimenting, inventing, criticizing, perfectionizing, which is not a word, until we ended up finally, after I cannot tell you how many weeks of recording and editing, and then ultimately mastering, we came with the final product.
Fantastic. I mean, it's quite a big effort. I mean, people have numerous ways of creating music these days. I mean, unfortunately, there is this sort of looming thing called AI, which is starting to start to happen, but it's good to see something so thorough being put together and for such a good result. So with the album, what's been the plan? Has there been like an album tour or album launch or anything like that?
We've had an interesting launch process. We actually launched the physical copies. I have some in my bag, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Which we're also quite proud of. It looks very pretty. We launched those in March. 7th of March was our physical album launch at the Great Club, Marrickville. We sold it out, had almost 300 people packed to the rafters. It was an amazing, amazing night. We had all our guest singers. Ilan Kidron, who's the lead singer of the Potbellies, very famous dance band, had just gotten off the plane from Japan. We're lucky that Marrickville is close to the airport, so he sort of snuck in a halftime and then waltzed on stage about 10 minutes later. So it was an amazing night. We then went on tour early April to tour the physical copy of the album. We went down to Wodonga. We sold out an amazing show at the most extraordinary gastro pub called Church Street, which I highly recommend anyone visiting through Albury Wodonga visits. The best pasta I've had in my life. Amazing gig. We played in Melbourne at the Kadima Theatre in Elstonwick. We then went to headline the Cresfest, which is in Creswick, an hour and a half out of Melbourne. We had something that they provided for us called the Klezfest at Cresfest, Klezmer Street Festival. So we got to lead hundreds of people the vast majority of whom had never, I think, even heard of klezmer, certainly not Jewish, dancing traditional horror, the traditional circle dance to a lot of this music, which was such a treat. I can't even begin to describe how gorgeous that was to look out and see people, imbibing our music with joy and with open hearts. And we had some amazing music and experiences that weekend. We finished up in Canberra on the way back at the Jewish Memorial Centre, I think it's the Jewish Cultural Centre. And we're about to head off, actually, in a couple of weeks for another tour. This one is a support tour, our first support tour for the extraordinary Melbourne Ska Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
They luckily hit us up. They wanted to support for their South Queensland and New South Wales legs of their national tour. So we'll be playing much the same music for much bigger crowds.
Fantastic. Pat Powell's very involved with that group.
He is. Pat Powell also is an extra in our music video for Toxic Moonlight. If you look very closely in the last 20 seconds, you'll see it.
Yeah, actually, he gets everywhere, Pat.
He does.
I think he's a Marrickville local, and whenever I'm out for dinner, because I'm a Marrickville local as well, I always just run into him. So it ends up always just being a chat with Pat.
He's a legend.
Most nights.
If you're listening, Pat, we love you, mate.
Very good. So it's quite a wonderful journey with this album. So tell me a little bit about the ensemble Chutney. So who are the members and sort of why are they there and sort of what are they doing and all that sort of stuff?
Oh, if we could answer those last two questions. So we have Ben Samuels on clarinet. We have Paul Kodor, who co-founded the band with me back in kind of mid-2019, early 2020, on keys. We have Ralph Marshall on bass, but really it's not just bass. It's bass and Moog and a couple of synths and BVs and you name it. We have Yismail on percussion, and we have our most recent addition, Cam Reed, on drums, and I'm Ben Adler on violin. Additionally, as mentioned, we have extraordinary guest singers who are part of our extended family. On the album, we have Sarit Michael, whom you heard already, and we also have Ilan Kidron, I mentioned, and Doron Chester. And what are we doing together? The concept, look, Paul, so we're not religious Jews, but it's a complex conversation. Jews often feel connected, especially in the diaspora, that is outside of Israel, to each other through religious institutions, even though we may not be religious ourselves, if that makes sense. So Paul and I, as part of that framework, play almost every week at our local synagogue, Emmanuel Synagogue, and they have a band there, which, we've been playing for 13 years, actually. So for a number of those years, maybe 2014 onwards, basically, Paul would nag. There's a Hebrew word called nudnik. He would nudnik me. He would keep pestering me about, maybe it's Yiddish, about starting a klezmer band. And at the time I was, as you might recall, Elsen, because we studied at the conservatorium together, I was a snob, and I was very set in my classical ways. I was playing with the Australian Chamber Orchestra for a couple of years there, and I kept saying, I have no time for this nonsense. And then I had time, and our friend Josh Drury, who's now a doctor, who was our first clarinet player, was organising the music for a festival of Jewish ideas called Limud, which was being held at the Roundhouse, UNSW. He called me up in 2019 and said, you want to play some music? Because I had space, I said yes, and then I joined the Dots, and I said, I can get Paul off my back, finally, if I bring him along to this festival. So Chutney started without a name as a trio, playing some of the same music that we actually have recorded finally. And the concept was simply, let's play klezmer music, the folk music of our ancestors, or part of our ancestors, those with European ancestry. And then also let's play whatever other music, such as jazz standards, that we feel we like. The only guiding principle was our personal aesthetic, and our personal aesthetic, with degrees of variation between myself and Paul, there's a bit of daylight there, largely is about what can move people. For me, it's what can move people emotionally. For Paul, often it's what can move people physically. There's clearly a big overlap between those two. And that was the concept. We're very lucky. We played a gig a few months later with a wonderful bassist called Mohammed Mehmed Basic. I think that's how you pronounced his surname. I hope I didn't miss.
Yeah, I think he also goes by Mo.
Mo is probably a slightly less risky thing to say on radio. So we played with Mo a few months later, so we had a quartet, and then a friend of ours, Rachel Drubetsky, now Moshel, whom we played for at her wedding actually in Melbourne a few years back. She had a band, had just come back from Woodford and wanted, again, support. So we had about 2 weeks to pull together a proper band. We had no name, we had no online presence, no branding, no concept, no identity, also no drummer or electric bassist. And we found all those things in Oscar Gross on bass and Matt Drury on drums, and that was our first lineup. So we played Lazy Bones opening set, and people loved it. And that's when we realized, this klezmer fusion thing that we're doing, modernizing klezmer, fusing it and marrying it irreverently with a huge range of different styles from, as you would have heard already, jazz, swing, there's some Dixieland, pop, reggae, samba, tango, classical, funk, you name it. This concept of just playing and hopscotching with styles, with passion, with conviction, and with integrity, always basically derived from our Jewish roots, we realized that had legs. And so the concept ever since has been to just grow and push those legs as far as possible.